I was taught that my body is a temptation. I was taught that my body needs to be shut down. One of the things that's awakened in me is just the sacredness of it, like the invitation to find spirit and life and breath and, God speaking to me through my body.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer, and today is another special episode of the Holy Health Podcast. And so when we talk about holy health, we've talked about educating, empowering, and equipping you to take ownership of your health so that we can live for health as worship, not health as performance. What does this look like in our day-to-day? And I think one of the biggest health problems we've seen right now is that we've separated God's design from the true sense of integration. And we've started to see it in a couple different ways. We've separated the physical from the mental. We've separated the mental from the emotional. We've separated the mental, emotional, and spiritual all from the physical. And we see them in their own silos. But when you silo something that was meant to be one, you end up finding the disintegration of the thing itself. And I couldn't be more excited for the guest that we have on today, because not only is she a fellow Canadian, so she already has amazing clout in my books, but she has spent her entire career really helping to find people find health from the inside out. And that's what we stand for here at Own It and within the Holy Health movement, is that how do we ultimately get our hearts right so that we can start to live in obedience for who God is. And so today, Danielle Strickland is with us from Vancouver, Canada. And I couldn't be more excited and just grateful that you decided to say yes.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. It was an easy yes. I love what you're up to.
I want to start really, Danielle. Where did you kind of start your work? Where did this passion start to really come from, where you're wanting to really look at health from the inside out and how somebody's heart is shaped and the traumas they go through and their past and how that ultimately impacts and influences habits and behaviors in somebody's life? Where did this all really kind of come to fruition for you? Before we dive right in, I want to give you guys a little bit of a gift, because most high performers that I work with aren't struggling because they lack discipline. They're struggling because they've never found a system that's really been built around their actual biology. And that's what this show stands for, is giving you the personalized approach to your health. And that's why I built the Performance Capacity Audit, which is designed to expose exactly what is holding you back. And so in under 8 minutes, it's going to benchmark you across 4 key pillars: stress and recovery, energy and focus, physical performance, and hormones and metabolism. And it's going to give you a personalized action plan based on your data. On top of that report, you're going to get instantly, you will also have a 20-minute results review with one of our Own It health coaches, and that's completely free. It's a $400 value, completely free for you guys because you're loyal listeners to the show. And so I don't want you to keep guessing. I want you to take the audit so we can help guide you in a personalized way. The exact same value core that we speak about on this show, available to you. Be sure you click down on the show notes so that you can gain access to it and take ownership of your health.
That's an interesting question, because I'm not sure that I have an aha moment apart from my own journey, probably is where most of the ahas came from. I certainly had a lot of learning. I've worked a lot with women who suffered sexual exploitation. And of course, that not only is an evil that destroys the soul, but it also destroys the body. And I started learning just pragmatically, practically walking with women that illness, the results in the body of what they had been through were a lot, and so that was just sort of a learning curve that I had, but I hadn't really connected it to my own life much. For me, my own physical journey has always been like a punishing one. I have to beat my body into submission. I have to be in physical shape. I actually need to sweat and work out just to feel okay. I get that. It helps me clear my brain. So all of my own physical training was always just like very punitive. And then it was always very driven, like I've got to run the race. I've done a couple Tough Mudders. I've done a few marathons. I've done a bunch of triathlons, but everything was, and I remember one time just sort of run. And of course, my whole life was also that way. It was also highly driven. And then I remember one time I broke my foot, actually, hurt my back, and I couldn't really run, but I was trying anyway. And I remember the spirit just saying to me, do you think you could maybe slow down? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can. Anyway, I ended
What
up
will
going to like
happen if I do?
right. And I don't know any other way. Yeah, I don't know any
Yep.
way. And I had a couple of formative moments. One was I went to like a stretch class and I felt like I was totally wasting my time because of course it wasn't hard and I didn't sweat and I'm just like, what a waste. Anyway, went there and I remember an instructor doing a, thing saying, do this, if you can, but if you can't, that's okay too. Just listen to your body. And I remember saying like, what? Like internally, like I don't listen to my body listens to me. You know what I mean? Like I don't listen
Yeah.
to my body. So that was one where it was like, oh, you can listen to your body. And then two, I started using this breath prayer to help me slow down and to help me kind of be present in my
Hmm.
body instead of just using my body like a tool, to actually use it like a real person
Yeah.
and to be in it. And I used this prayer called Be Loved prayer, which is still one of my favorites. So you breathe in be, and then you breathe out loved. And when I heard this being taught, they said the first time you do this, when you breathe out loved, breathe it into your body and just start imagining the love of God just like going to your body, the places that are hurting, the places that are, you know, embarrassing, all the things. And so I did this, and I remember sending love to my broken foot and sending love to my injured back and sending love to like all the jiggly parts I was ashamed of. And I had this massive revelation, Justin, on that mat. I realized that was the first time in my life that I had ever intentionally loved my body.
Wow.
And then I had this weird kind of like vision, revelation, whatever, where me and my body came to me for marriage counseling, and which I've done for tons of couples. And I was saying to my body, tell me again what's going on. And my body was like, she won't listen to me. You know, she
Wow.
covers me up. She won't like show me. She like shuts me down. She disparages me. Like she speaks badly about and I'm literally like, I'm as in the counselor role going like, you got to get away from this relationship. Like this is not a healthy relationship. And then having this realization, like, I can't leave the relationship with my body. Like we're stuck
Wow.
together. And it was a massive revelation where I was like, I have got to learn how to live in relationship with myself and with
Yeah.
my body. And it drastically changed not only how I felt and sort of how I spoke to myself, how I saw myself, how I relate to myself, but it also changed the way that I work out. It changed, what I was aiming for. It changed all kinds of things. And it's really opened up a beautiful exploration of what it means to be in a good relationship and a right relationship with my body and my faith.
Hey guys, pausing for a second because I want to tell you about something I want every single person listening to do. It's called the Performance Capacity Audit. And in less than 8 minutes, it gives you a real score across 4 pillars that drive your long-term output: stress and recovery, energy and focus, physical performance, hormones and metabolism. Most people finish and immediately see something that they didn't expect because you're going to get your results instantly, plus a complimentary 20-minute call with one of our team members to help guide you down the route to your action plan. It's a $400 value, completely free, so that we can help guide you on how to take ownership of your health. Everything that we've been talking about on these episodes, everything that you've been listening to today, made actionable in a personalized way. So take that audit. It's down there in the show notes. And now back to the show. I love that example because I think sometimes we think of this body that we live in as what am I trying to say? We almost disrespect it or disregard it as just this momentary meat suit that we're walking around in for however long we're on this earth before we get to go to heaven. But I think it's so wild when you actually pause and you get internal. And I think the prayer that you were talking about, the Be Loved prayer, is so powerful because it's a moment to slow down and truly internalize in ourselves and be in our body. The only thing that God called very good, the only thing that he created that was very good. And when we start to realize how special, how amazing, how all-knowing this thing is, and what an amazing teacher it is, it starts to change and shift the identity that we have within it. Would you say that what would you say the identity shift for yourself became when you talked about health holistically, or even maybe physically for you in that space? How did that identity shift for you?
I mean, I would say that I had literally a revelation that my body
Yeah.
was good. And I mean, I think it's worthy to say out loud that I was taught either explicitly, which I think I do remember some explicit teaching about this, or implicitly that my body was bad.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the great revelations of this generation is this, I mean, I'm preparing a message for resurrection this week, and Jesus resurrected in a body.
In a body.
And,
Yep.
his scars are in his resurrected body, and he eats with that body, and he connects with the disciples with the body, and he breathes on the disciples with that body. And so I think even the whole incarnation is a radical divine signature of approval on matter. Your
So good.
bodies matter. He had a body. He took
Yeah.
a body. And without any shame, I remember years ago thinking, one of Jesus's favorite ways to introduce himself on earth was as the Son of Man, which has two kind of connotations. One is from Daniel, this expected revelation of the Messiah for the Jewish people. And the other is literally, it translates the human one. So Jesus is walking around unashamed and proud to be the human one. He takes on human form, not with disgust and not with disgrace, which is what I thought my whole life, that he was kind of disgusted by it, but he had to do it. Someone had to take one for the team. And I think I was taught to punish my body, and especially as a woman, I would say growing up in a Christian framework, I was taught that my body is a temptation. I was taught that my body needs to be shut down. I was taught that listening to my body was emotional and I shouldn't listen. So I was taught to shut down all of those spidey senses that are in our physiological makeup that God put in there to go like, hey, you should pay attention to this. I was taught to shut it down. And so I think one of the things that's awakened in me is just the sacredness of it, like the invitation to find spirit and life and breath and God speaking to me through my body and God being in my body. And so that would be, I mean, it changes everything, doesn't it? And even how we connect with one another as bodies. So that's the other thing, is when God said it was very good, the very good was after Eve was created, because the not so good was man by himself, right? So even this idea of interconnectedness, and again, that's back to what you said, it's not even so much like now we got to get in shape. Now we got to live holistically. We have to live embodied. We have to live, even our faith is faith in a body. So one of the great enemies of the Christian faith in the early church was Gnosticism, which is basically just like the only thing that matters is spiritual things. And Paul is that's why he's just constantly like, Jesus suffered and he died and we will connect with him in his crucifixion because matter matters to God. And we cannot just disconnect our faith from our bodies. They are in the same place.
It's so beautiful, kind of like the direction you're taking us. And to be honest with you, some of even what you just said, like I hadn't really even connected. Like I'd never heard the term Gnosticism before, but I think even, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said Gnosticism is the focus that only spiritual things impact us, and that's what we need to focus on. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, there's a disconnect between what is earthly and what is spiritual. So Gnostics would be like, it's just a spiritual principle, not an actual physical reality.
So like a disconnection from what was meant to be integrated in one. And I think that term, like that makes so much sense because it's not just something that was happening in the past, but rather it's something that I think is still happening actively today in the church. And obviously, we were just at Exponential. It's a conference for you listeners who aren't familiar, but about 7,000 pastors from around the world came, and I ran a little breakout room, and Danielle keynoted from the main stage. And the theme of the entire conference, which is so rare, is what does it look like to be a healthy leader? And they broke it up into mental, physical, spiritual, and relational. and really looking at these areas of health from a pastoral and church-related space. And the conversations that I was having with these pastors, number one, it was such a foreign concept to them. And number two, they've felt it for a long time, but haven't known what the actual solution was. And I just find that so wild and crazy, because when I read the Bible, all I see is a health book on how to live and how to bring, how to exist
Mhm.
in this beautiful, complex world that that God created.
Mhm.
And how do we find John 10:10's promise, which is life and life abundantly, which is to live obediently to what it was that was created to be one and whole to begin with. And that when you start to look at um the science that kind of comes around with this is why for so many of the teaching that I bring in, I love heart rate variability. I think it's the best, most holistic metric for looking at health and how well you are internally first versus externally, because mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional stress, the body does not know the difference. It cannot decipher the difference. And thus, HRV is that measurement between those time intervals between each heartbeat. And based
Mhm.
on the variation, it
Mhm.
determines whether or not the body is adapting well to stress, or based on your habits and behaviors, or it's not. And so it's like God literally created a internal mechanism to help guide us and alert us as to, hey, you know what? It's time to take a look at the habits and behaviors and the life rhythms that you have, because we're out of rhythm. Or,
Mhm.
you know what? The way that you're operating and the way that you're living right now is in full alignment with what I've called you to. And thus you feel the difference.
Mhm. Yeah.
When you were kind of experiencing this journey and kind of going through this, and even the time that you spent at Exponential, what were some of the senses that you got from the conversations you had, kind of the holistic view, and just even a lot of your touring around the world speaking? What is the awakening that you're seeing when it comes to health and biblical scripture, physical, spiritual integration from the larger worldview?
I think that there's a deep hunger because I
Yeah,
think the need, and you felt that at Exponential, didn't you? There's a deep
big time.
hunger. And then some of these things are tricky to talk about because they've been so badly talked about before.
Yeah,
So, I felt the pressure in the room when Rich Velotis was going to talk about the body, where just everybody's like, or even Dave introduced, our physical bodies is something we need to talk about because so much of our talk about bodies have been shame based and you should be ashamed, and I think even there was a little bit of things that he said that I was like, ooh, ah, but like, just because of this shame based approach that if you're out of shape, somehow you should be ashamed. When really, if you're out of shape, you're probably just needing to dial in to what it is that is going on and find out. And of course, we know like not everybody, people have things in their body that they have to deal with. So like a lot of the clients, the people that friends that I would have walked with that came out of severe trauma, like they're not going running anytime soon because they don't need they need to learn how to rest. Like they need to take care of their bodies. They need some
yeah,
tender care. Like they probably need a year at a spa just to like undo all of the trauma and then maybe talk about strength training, like so those are some of I think it's like it's about this attention to, but I would say that around the world, I would see that people are very hungry for a real embodied faith. And what I would say, what I mean by that is that our bodies are involved in our worship. So
yeah,
much of our Christianity specifically has been turned into a spectator sport where everybody just sits around being talked to. So this is something I'm really passionate about. Like I'm running these retreats that are really encounter-based retreats. So in a couple of weeks, I'll go and do a cold plunging and breath and Nordic sort of spa thing at a hiking retreat where basically we'll do some spiritual reflections, but they'll be over the campfire. They'll be while we're lying on our backs in between our breath sessions, because I really just feel like people are tired of just talking and talk is cheap.
yeah,
And that's actually not how Jesus did it either. Jesus did all of his teaching was like, come with me as we walk together, as we eat together. Everything's embodied. So I feel like there's a real hunger for it. And then I think the hunger is related to the desperate need for it. I think it's so disconnected from one another and from ourselves. And I would say also that this whole conversation, when Jesus when the New Testament talks about the body, for the most part, it's talking about the people of God together. So again, like it's set in us. We are a body, but we are part of a body. And so even that connection is such an important, because we could easily just be like, okay, that's it. We got to take, we're in our bodies and we've got to be in right relationship with our bodies and still be isolated from one another.
Yeah.
So the fullness of health, and I think I introduced this in my talk of this concept, the Hebrew concept of shalom, was not that every individual thing that was created was perfect, but that the way it connected to everything was perfect. And it's that connection. So even when people like have actual injuries or illness and they can't work out the way that we would love for them to work out, the way they interconnect with the body is part of this perfection that we have. So part of even me like learning in this season is even like slowing down so people can join me on some things I want to do. And, one of the strategies I've used in some discipleship stuff I've done is Tough Mudder teams, where we train together and we do something hard together. But one of the Tough Mudder principles is that you finish together. And I remember just the struggle in our group, because some of our group were just like killing it and they could just go so much faster, so much, easier. And some of our groups were really struggling. And so the real, the workout for us was to stay together. And what it required was for some of us who wanted to, is to slow down and to be present with people who are struggling through. And then for the others to kind of like do what they could to stay together. So I think there's something too, when we talk about the body, that we need to also, this is also a collective understanding of the body. It's not an individual, excellent, only conversation. It's connection.
I love the conversation points because it comes right back to Romans 12:1 for me. Use your body as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And I've just seen this so clearly for so long, where he loves it when we get into the word. He loves it when we throw our hands up in worship at a worship set on a Sunday morning. He loves it when we go and engage in the men's or women's groups at night. But how are we living? What does that say about our true ownership of wearing our faith, living our faith out daily? And using your body as a living sacrifice, that's not dying for our calling. That's not burning ourselves out and firing the candle at both ends and just literally dying for what it is that we've been put here for. There was only one man that was crucified for the calling on his life, and none of us are him. And oftentimes I think that living sacrifice is simply another word for obedience, doing the hard thing, doing the thing that we don't want to do. And for many of us, it's rest. For many of us, it's doing less. For many of us, it's
working out. Yeah.
Working out,
Sure.
getting that extra hour of sleep or going to bed an extra hour earlier. It's not just because this conversation of health, especially in this space, has always ever been, what's your diet? What's your workout plan?
And it's always been framed in self-help.
Yes.
And this is, I think, the reframing that actually this is about a holistic approach to a holistic faith for a whole people. And we're all part of that. So I think that's, the second Romans 12:2, is don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So again, this is the real word of repentance in Greek is metanoia, which it means to literally change your mind. It's like to have your mind blown by a new reality. So we often talk about repentance as I'm really sorry for what I did before, but repentance is really like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And then the fruit of repentance is like, I've got to change some things to fit this new reality. And so I think this is in my life, I would say this is a metanoia area for me. And my invitation for people is to get metanoiaed, get your mind blown that this life is bigger than, different from. God is present in inviting us into transformative practices that are embodied in our bodies, in our everyday, in the way we think, in the way we move, in the way we connect with each other, that is meant to, be a transforming alternative to what our current realities are. So if you think about, what are the pain points on our culture? There are all these things that we suffer with. So we push back against those pain points by offering an alternative reality. What if people didn't have to suffer through anxiety What if they could actually learn? When the disciples have held themselves up in the room after Jesus's death, and they've locked the doors from the inside. They're not being locked in. They're locking themselves in because they're afraid, and kind of they should be. It's a frightening time. And Jesus comes into that room and he breathes on them. So this is fascinating because we know that, obviously theologically, John is referring to the garden when God gave breath to humanity. So he's sort of saying, oh, this is a new humanity after Jesus's death. So he's breathing on humanity again. But also physically, I think he's actually teaching them to breathe. I think breath is one of the great strategies to fight anxiety. I've found it so in my own life. I've taught people practices. I'm going to host a breath coach here who's a beautiful Jesus follower, and he's going to teach us all the physiology that's going on when you learn how to breathe. And we will understand that our culture doesn't breathe well. They're actually breathing shallowly, and it's fueling their anxiety. So my faith is actually leading me in a practice that is actually going to offer a culture a remedy, and not just a remedy eventually, like when we get to heaven, but a remedy right now. Is while we're here, we can receive the breath, the Spirit of God that will calm our nervous system down, that will feed oxygen into our system, and that will actually then release us to be people of faith and people of courage. So I think there's so many things like that. And the other thing that's really, really baffled me and actually just really excited me in some ways. So both, Justin is in my exploration of this. A couple of years ago, my friend invited me to a cold plunging retreat. It was a Wim Hof inspired thing. So the instructor was trained by Wim Hof. So probably people on your podcast know the Iceman, and what are there, 12 million people that follow him on YouTube.
Yeah.
So he's a sensation. I read his autobiography because after I said I would go, I got a little bit scared. So I started researching what I agreed to. And, in his autobiography, it's really fascinating, but his mom was a devout Catholic, and she prayed. He almost didn't make it. He was a twin, and she prayed when he was born that he would become a missionary. And Wim Hof writes in his autobiography, I know this isn't what my mom had in mind, but I do want to serve people. I do think that prayer is a good prayer. So I pray every day for Wim Hof that he'll have a full understanding of who Jesus is in his exploration of the body. But I'm in this cold plunge, and a couple of things happen. One is somehow in the introductions, I get introduced as like a Christian leader, pastor. And so as this retreat unfolds, at least 4 people take me aside and say, hey, I'm a Christian too. Do you think it's okay that I'm here? They're all, because all of their people have told them, they're going, this is crazy. This is off the track, So then that was interesting to me, the fear and the way that people just assume things that are not familiar to them, or the way that we've done this, So you have to go to a New Age festival to get any sort of this stuff. And then you go to a Christian church to get like the right stuff. And so that was interesting to me. And then the second thing that happened as I explored a little bit more of cold plunging, I was in the tub actually. And I had this memory. One of the heroes in my tradition in faith is a woman named Catherine Booth. She's the co-founder of the Salvation Army. And I remembered in a biography I read of her that she was a water therapy person and alternative. She's a vegetarian, all these. She was very explorative of like other ways besides just, dominant cultural ways that healing happened. And then I stumbled in my research of that. So I was like, I wonder what Catherine Booth would think of cold water, and I instantly realized, oh, she was already doing it. Like she was practicing this before, a century before any of this stuff came back. And then I stumbled on John Wesley's 5 miracles. So 5 pillars of miracles, he calls them. And this is, if my listeners are familiar with Christian history, John Wesley is most famous he was a revivalist. He was part of the Great Awakening. Literally, like he was a revivalist preacher where supernatural things would happen. People would be healed. He's just phenomenal. But all I ever heard was that he was an incredible preacher. God showed up. Supernatural things happened. I didn't know anything about his framework for healing. So I explored John Wesley. It turns out John Wesley was a doctor. He was almost a doctor when he was called to preach it. So he'd gone to medical school. So he was super interested in how the body worked. He's actually credited in medical journals for creating the electro impulse machine. So he was treating depression with EMT before, you know, anybody even thought of this, because he understood that God created all things, including electricity, and there was electricity in our bodies, and surely this could go together. And he used all his money from his popular books to fund these medical clinics in the UK in poor neighborhoods where people couldn't get medical treatment. And he did, anyway, the guy's phenomenal. So I looked up his stuff. Like, what does he think about this? Because I only know him as like the supernatural guy. And he has five miracles, pillars of miracles. The one is supernatural. So Jesus can literally heal people. And he saw that in his ministry. That's all I ever heard about. That he believes in the miracle of modern medicine, that doctors, remedies, you know, science, that actually these things are miraculous in many regards and we should look into them. Then he believes in the miracle of nature. Jesus heals through the natural self-healing power of the human body, which is seen as a gift of God's nature. What? I had never heard that in my whole life. Like I said, I was raised in a tradition that actually would say this guy's a fantastic prophet, an example of, you know, God's power. And they admitted to tell me that he believed that the body was a gift and that God's natural ability to heal was part of how things worked and a miracle. And then he would believe in the miracle, of course, of just Jesus' resurrection and the power of resurrection post-death. So the miracle of a resurrected life. I mean, I don't know about you, Justin, but that was mind-blowing to me. I was just like, how did I not know this? How did I resist this? So then as I was exploring, like, oh, there is this way to kind of almost like shock your body, to like then your body then kicks into like a resiliency practices, how it's designed to, you know, and then you can start using breath even after a cold plunge to warm your body up from the inside out, and just the physical reality of that, and exploring how helpful that is, all kinds of different things. I take prayers in with me now when I do cold plunging, stuff like that. And I just started realizing like, oh, this is not new. This is old.
Yep.
What's new is this 150-year church history that's taught us that we shouldn't listen to our bodies, that we should shut them down, that God is not like that. Our Christianity, our faith is somehow separate from and super spiritual and disconnected from what we practice, the way we live. And there's all kinds of reasons people suggest that happened in America, namely probably slavery. You know, that you had to create a Christianity or a faith belief system that was separate from the way we were living, because the way we were living was actually oppressive.
Yeah.
And so you had to actually disconnect those things in order to say that you were still keeping the faith when clearly you were violating the principles of the faith. All kinds of different things. I think, you know, the Enlightenment, just sort of this pursuit of a work culture, you know, that all that we value is work. You know, so that this is all our empire pursuits. So it's just like, it's got to be bigger, it's got to be faster, it's got to be greater. And then we just sacrifice everything on the altar of progress or success. And that's made us all sick, you know, except for a few who are really benefiting. But the majority of us are sick. So there's all kinds of maybe different ways and reasons we got here. But one of my great discoveries is this is not actually new. This is most rooted in the purest and truest form of our Christian faith. It's always been what God is about. It's always the invitation of Jesus to not just believe something theologically, but to live something practically, and to have that impact the way that we're designed, which is all of those facets of ourselves. So, I mean, it's metanoia for everybody. Have your mind blown, everybody, and enter into this faith that is so rooted and beautiful and rich and deep, wide and long and high, you know. It's gorgeous.
I love it. And even to that point, like, I think breath work is one of the best things that we can do in order to hear the voice of God. Going back to kind of a little bit of what you were talking about is within Holy Health, we've got something called Holy Breath, where we literally are taking breath work back for the kingdom. What does it look like to be able to practice it and focus on hearing the voice of God and being connected to him in such a powerful way so that we can listen, be obedient, and gain wisdom for where to go and what to do next? And the first time I ever heard, or the first time I've ever experienced this was back in 2005. Yes, 2005. And I was in one of my classes, and we were doing a breathwork practice. And first time I've ever done it. And we went in and we did the breath that they led us through, 2 inhales in, 1 exhale out, some breath holds, some different things. And I'll never forget, it had to have been about half an hour in. I rolled over and it had felt like 5 minutes had gone by. my shirt was soaking wet. And I looked to my left and somebody was kind of just waking up. I looked to my right and somebody was kind of stretching and yawning. And I visibly was shook. And the facilitator went around and said, "So what did you think about this? What did you think about this? What did you think about this?" And I said, and a couple of people were like, "Well, I feel more relaxed. I feel more present." And they got to me and I said, I had a conversation with Jesus. Like, it was vivid. It was like so real. And I'll never forget what she said next. She goes, "Let's just leave Jesus out of this and let's go back to mindfulness." And it was at that moment that I knew there was something deeper. There was something bigger that breath does to us. And today, we all know what sleep apnea is. We stop breathing at night. And so there's these CPAP machines and different things that we can do to help alleviate sleep apnea. But just as of 2 years ago, they came up, and actually it's a literal diagnosis, is email apnea, where we stop breathing throughout the day.
Yeah, or just technology in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Where you're
call
on a
it
screen
email
and you're
apnea.
kind of holding your breath. Yeah. And you're not
Exactly.
breathing.
Exactly.
Yep.
You stop breathing,
Yeah.
which is when we get in, and the root word of anxiety is that to be disconnected. And so when we start to come back, it's like, man, God gave us 14,000 opportunities to come back to him every single day. And the second thing that I think is crazy, and it was like one of those aha moments for me and those revelations, was where it says God breathed into the nostrils of man.
Yeah.
And you start to think about, if you've ever read the book Breathe by
We're
Danielle
designed that
Strickland
way.
or J.D.
Yeah.
Nestor, you're
Yeah.
designed to breathe through your nose, not through your mouth. And when we're the
Right.
mouth breathers, start to have all of these different metabolic and autoimmune and nutrient absorption issues throughout their body. But when you go back and actually start nasal breathing, whether at night or throughout the day, all of a sudden your body starts to function the way it's supposed to. And it's like these types of things
It's wild.
that just go, my gosh, like he designed us perfectly. Like, go back to that concept of like very good. Like, we don't have to try
And
to-
even in Hebrew, of course, ruach is breath and spirit. They're synonymous with each other. They're interchangeable. And of course they are. So,
of course.
right. And also even just the rhythm of breath as a receiving and giving, this reciprocity of breath that is like, so even just the way that we're literally wired to survive is actually a generous posture of freely we receive and then freely we give and then freely we receive and freely we give. So it's all built in and it's our disconnection from this built-in reality of God being present, God working, God trying to teach us and help us even by the way that we breathe, that we are connected, and that his great desire is that we would stay connected and be connected and help others. So even the idea that like, the reason why your instructor even would probably say, let's just leave Jesus out of it, is because Jesus has been so co-opted by people who, so her idea of Jesus being in it is like, oh no, now we're going to get like in trouble. It's going to shut everything down, instead of actually, no, this is the source of breath.
Yeah.
I met the source of breath when I was doing breath work, and that source of breath, set me free. I mean, and after people will often say like, see, when they want to keep Jesus out of it, I'm like, I think they want to keep the Jesus they've heard about out of it. But I think there's somebody to introduce to them who is the source of healing and offers us this beautiful invitation to a transformed life.
What you just said, just like kind of put this right into my mind is obviously coming off tour with Brandon Lake, and he just wrote a song with Lainey Wilson, The Jesus I Know Now. And the whole concept is that the Jesus I used to know would raise a brow, didn't like the music up too loud, didn't always look down upon my sin, was chastising and rebuking me with everything. But the Jesus I know now is loving, is forgiving, is wanting a relationship with me, is redeeming of all of these things, is the one that is the guy that likes to have fun, is the guy that likes to smile and run with me in the fields, like that. And that's just the coming back to that statement that you were saying, is like, you actually get to meet him there. You even go back to like the water. Is I started to look this up as like cold plunging. Why is it good for nervous system regulation? We think about water in baptism. And where a lot of the baptisms were done, especially in Jesus' time, it was all done in 55 to 65 degree water. And it's
Oh, wow. Like, I mean, Francis of Assisi, St. Cuthbert, all the Desert Fathers, used to throw themselves in cold water or snow or whatever quite
Yep.
regularly to kind of like wake their system up to pray, to
Yep.
fight temptation. There's all these different, reasons. And probably they didn't even know. Like they're just doing the thing practically that works. They're not aware of the science. Well, we're just becoming aware of these things now. But again, this is not like Wim Hof didn't come up with this as much as he popularized it. This has been practiced and by Christians for a long time. Even this
Yeah.
idea of breath prayers from the beginning. These are ancient prayers that monastics would do to actually tune themselves to the Spirit of God. So, I mean, I just think it's fascinating. The Jesus I know now is the Jesus that has always been there and always
Exactly.
drawing us to himself. So there's something actually really beautifully gracious about a season where we are hungry for what it is that he has to give us. I mean, that's the thing. We're hungry for what he wants to fill us with. And that's a beautiful revelation.
Especially as this health wellness industry is encroaching on a $3 trillion industry and continuing to exponentially grow year after year. You start to see more as we start to have conversations like this, which I think are so powerful. Now, a lot of these different modalities that are being hijacked for that of new age spirituality or different things
Or
that
just
are kind of
self.
being
In the end, it just
exactly.
ends up just being rotating
Yes.
around self. And this is the great danger,
Yes.
is that even this journey would just lead us to more of ourselves. And it's like, no, this can't be that. We already have too much of that. And that's
Exactly.
where I think, where I was at the beginning of our conversation saying, like, the body in a New Testament concept is together.
Yes.
So that was part of my, like, John Wesley's impulse is to, like, how can I introduce these things to the poor, which would be shut out of these treatments? Like, how, and this is I think, the invitation. And this is the great Christian witness from the very beginning, which is what made it so spread, is it was an alternative to the dominant culture.
Yeah.
And one of its big alternatives was its diversity and
Yeah.
its equity. Like we're going to invite the have-nots with the haves, the slaves with the, we're going to invite the Jews with the Gentiles. We're just going to do something that looks totally different and has to work different. And all it is about connection with themselves, but then also with each other and how they connect relationally. So I think that this pursuit of wholeness includes, starts probably within us, maybe. Sometimes it starts without us. Like for Francis
Yeah.
of Assisi, he fell into a leper and found the leper was Jesus. And his ultimate disgust turned into radical love. And then that sent him on a pursuit that was beautifully spiritual. But so I think our relationship to each other is a big part of this conversation and should remain so that we don't focus this thing on ourselves.
1,000%. It's I was even having this conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about the concept of meditation, where Eastern meditation is about emptying your mind, whereas Christianity and the thought process of like Christian meditation is to actually fill it with God's word. What does that look like? They're complete opposites, where one relies solely upon emptying yourself to get closer to yourself. The other one causes you to fill it up to get closer to God. And that's always been what this has been about.
They're opposites of aim, but they're actually similar in practice. So that's, I think,
1,000%.
sometimes we're right. So it's sort of like we get scared of the practice instead of actually the aim.
Yes.
And the aim is the point. The practice, whatever will help us to connect. So this is those people that took me aside at that cold plunging retreat were saying, like, do you think it's okay that I'm here? I mean, my question would be like, are you drawing closer to Jesus through this? Do you feel a connection to God? Do you feel like your faith is actually moving in the direction of connection with Jesus? Because ultimately, relationship with Jesus is the point, not just our Christian practice. Relationship. Do you feel closer to Jesus through this? And every one of them was like, yeah, I've never felt closer to Jesus than when I'm pursuing these. So I'm like, okay, then problem solved. There's no other question. Like, is this building a relationship with God and through the person of Jesus? Then let's pursue that. Whatever will do that, whatever will help us do that, that is the point. And I wanted to put a little word in here because I was thinking about this, and we think about health and stuff. We actually never really talk about suffering, which I think we also should, because this is deeply related. Suffering happens in the body, and it's something that all Christians are invited to participate in. And it's one of the means by which we connect to Jesus. And this is another thing where I think the Protestant faith, or at least the religion that I grew up in, would suggest that all suffering is demonic. And all suffering has no value. And so you avoid suffering, but then also you avoid all things body. So basically you're just kind of like, and I remember when I was reading Mother Teresa, and she has probably an over-elevated view of suffering. So I wouldn't say I'm on that scale, where she saw suffering itself as redemptive in that it connected us to God and Jesus' suffering on the cross, right? But what she used to do, and I think this is fascinating, this speaks to our connection as the body, is she would pair every one of her missionaries in her order with an intercessor, so a prayer person. And the only way you could qualify to be an intercessor is if you were terminally ill. So,
Wow.
or if you suffered from an uncurable disease, because she believed that if you were that you were, through your suffering, connecting to God on an incredible level, that your prayers then would make a massive difference to the missionary that you were praying for and with. So she would partner them. And here's what's interesting about that. I don't know that I believe what she's saying about like all suffering's redemptive. But
Sure.
what I do believe is that what she was doing was giving value and agency to people who had been told they have no value and no agency. That she was blessing something that was embodied, that was physical suffering even, that actually that place was a place where God could dwell and that
Yeah.
God could partner with us even in that spot. And that she was linking that to missionaries, to the work. So these people who are like, you can't do anything because you're written off, because you're not in shape enough, or you're not good enough, or you're not this enough. She's like, no, you're the only ones who are enough to actually do this part of the work. And so there's something deeply, challenging to our culture around what we value. And again, I think it is an embodied, she believed in this embodied practice that God dwells in the bodies, even those bodies that are suffering, even those bodies that are so-called limited. She would say that actually gives you extra access, to the God who dwells in all things. So that's really challenged me too, because sometimes I get caught into this self-help idea of being the best and it's all excellent and it's all us being as trained up as we can. And then anyone who doesn't fit that or can't do that or isn't able to, somehow, again, those messages of shame or not enoughness or disconnectedness keep flowing somehow. And there's a part of me that's just like, yes, and it's our connectedness to each other that will actually bring wholeness that we're longing for.
And I think that's also the opportunity for us to actually take on the identity of a steward. Like we are called to be stewards of everything that we've been given, including this body. And it's as we walk in this, I almost think about it like a garden. Like when you're tending a garden, my wife's got a big, beautiful garden in the backyard, and she plants things, she waters them, she is out there tilling it every day, she's picking the things off that are growing. And there are some things that just do not grow. There's some things that just do not sprout up. They just didn't come up.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh my gosh, we have to start all over.
Right.
Bad garden. It's like, all right, cool. I guess we just
that
plant
didn't
some
work.
new ones. Yeah.
Right.
Guess we can just go and plant some new ones. Let's go and figure out what went on, and let's explore it, and let's learn more about it. Let's understand it at a greater level so that we can actually start to see it grow in the way that it does. And I think that is just a beautiful metaphor about like this thing that we live in and this thing that we dwell in. And it's, how can we understand this greater? Because if Jesus had a body, my gosh, I want to understand this body that I have at an nth degree more than I do today.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the garden, because one of my favorite things to think about these days is when Jesus said, don't worry about anything and don't be anxious about anything. Go look at the birds. I used to think it was, theoretical or figurative. And now I'm like, oh no, I think he meant go outside.
Literally.
Look at the ecosystem. Look at the interconnectedness of things. Look at the provision that God has for what he has made. That's the God that we are in connection with and in relationship with. And that should, calm us all down when we actually start participating in this beautiful shalom design and get connected to the source of all life,
I mean, my gosh, just even what you said, and even going back to that pillar of nature that you
Mhm.
spoke about earlier. We've traveled a lot, and we hold different retreats in different places. But we just came back from Costa Rica, and
Mhm.
where we stayed was an extremely undeveloped area. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And it was just pure nature and beauty, very raw.
Mhm.
And when we went for hikes and walks and even got on the four wheels and went through, it was like, my goodness,
Mhm.
the way in which the birds interact with the monkeys and the monkeys
Mm.
interact with the
It's
insects and the
beautiful.
insects interact with the rest of the flowers, and how everything has like
Yeah.
tight foliage at the top. But then if you looked from the top, it looked like a blanket. But when you went underneath, it
Mhm.
was like all open and it had
Mhm.
homes for these things. It was like, my gosh, like,
Mhm.
and it all happened from a big bang. Like it's crazy. Like
Yeah.
the designer had
Mhm.
every single thing looked after. And
Mhm.
if if the birds and the insects and the things of those minor qualities um are looked after, and why
Mhm.
wouldn't we think we are? Why wouldn't we think we're put
Right.
together at that same level, if not more, because we are the only thing that is very good? And so
Mhm.
I just think it's so beautiful. If someone was listening to this and they felt stuck, they felt anxious, they felt out of their body, disconnected from their body, and they've been frustrated for a long time, where would you tell them to start? What would you tell them to do first?
That's a really good question. I mean, I'm sure you have some answers in your platform. I put together a little course that I offer called Holistic Health, and it's my best practices as a Christian leader. Um, it's really basic, but it's just an invitation to try some things. So I said a lot of my prayers from the scripture to movement, so that's just to be in my body. I talk about breath prayers. Um, I do some cold plunging, like embracing discomfort as a spiritual practice, so that we're not just enduring what happens to us, but we're choosing to use our agency to move towards an invitation to partner with God. So there's just some few little introductions that I give and practices that I have that help me towards a holistic framework. But I would always, I mean, if I'm introducing this to people, I just always start with breath. And then I have a spiritual practice, like a rule of life that I follow called infinitum. And it's just Latin for boundless, which is, I think, the nature of God's love and essence. And I do a daily posture prayer where I actually use
Mm,
my body to match my words to pray. And that's been really a mind blowing, just small, but very significant movement in terms of embracing faith as a practice instead of just as a belief system. Yeah. And then I think some of the things we've talked about, go outside, just
yeah,
go outside and have a conversation
yeah,
with God. Like, take deep breaths. I have friends who set alarm, have set their clocks, have set alarms to breathe, to just do a quick breathing exercise. Um, yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of different places to begin. But what I would say is just begin, you know.
yeah,
And again, this is like we get into this, our ideas of perfection are not shalom, they're perfection. And so
yeah,
we all get paralyzed because we can't do it perfectly. But I'm like, that's not it. The perfection that is offered in Christ is the connection. That's where it
yeah.
is. So
I would
connect,
say,
just begin. A partner, a prayer walk. I've turned a couple of meetings, standing meetings, into walks, so we don't have to go exercise. Like, we're not like sweating, so we don't have to re-shower and all that stuff. If you're a woman, that matters more. But their movement, we're moving together. And the
yeah,
conversations that I have with those people while we're walking is very different than while we're sitting. I think
totally,
the quality goes
100%.
way up, and the connection goes way deeper. So just little tweaks like that, where you're connecting with your body, with your faith, with your practices, with your people. I think just do more of that. Move towards that and see
I
how
love
that
it.
moves you towards more.
So good. I often
Mhm.
say the disciplines are not the goal. The disciplines are the path to the goal. And
Mhm.
that goal is always to become more like Christ. How can we become
Yeah.
more connected? How can we align further together? And when and when the disciplines become the goal, they just become check marks. They become check
Yep.
boxes.
Yep.
And that's never what they were intended to be. They were intended to be things that shape you, form you, disciple you, guide you, lead you to walk in the essence of who God's called you to be. And so I've loved this conversation. And listeners, I hope that it's blessed you guys as well. As I said, every single time, if this has blessed you, just share it with somebody. Share it with somebody who's walking through something that maybe this conversation today is going to be something that changes the trajectory of their life or allows them a first step to go and see something they've been struggling with for a long time. And their obstacle becomes their testimony at some point. And so, Danielle, where can people interact with you more or further if they were like, you know what, I want to know more about what she's up to? Where should we send them?
So DanielleStrickland.com is my website. You can get to all the places from there, I think. I do write longer form at Substack, and there is an article just on cold plunging and breath that I've written exploring some of those things I've talked about. So you can find me on Substack too, just Danielle Strickland.
Listeners, you can access them all down there as well. But every single one of you, my prayer for you, as always, is that you would see your health as something of worship. You would see this thing that you've been given, the thing that you've been blessed with, as the thing to carry out your calling. And it's not something to live separate on the side that comes at the end of the day, but rather something that becomes integrated into your entire life. And that as we start to see how science and scripture align and are not enemies, are not warring against each other, but rather walking together, how can we become more connected together? How can we become more connected to ourselves? But more importantly, how can we become more connected to God, the one who created us, the one who made us, the one who guided us, and the one who continues to lead us through this life so that we can find life and life abundantly? Remember, everybody, his success is different. So own your different, and we'll see you guys next week.